Welcome to 3SN. We are going to be talking Pitt and Penn State football. What a crazy weekend it was for those two programs, but sadly both kind of disappointing in their own way. Dawson, why don't you fill us in what's been going on with Penn State?
What's been going on was we had a great turnout for the White House game against Alabama. It was a great first 7 minutes in which Penn State drove down the field methodically, using all 3 timeouts and only getting 3 points out of it. And it was all downhill for Alabama from there. And it was a disappointing finish with Penn State using both quarterbacks along the way, neither too impressively, and ended up being a 27-11 loss against the number 3 Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and I'm watching the game. There was definitely a lot of excitement that first drive, even though they did find a way to burn 3 timeouts. But it still comes down to the quarterback situation again. Still no answer. And going into week 3, this is definitely alarming. What do you have to say about that?
Well, from sitting in the student section for the game, as soon as McGloin went in, amazingly there was a decrease in excitement. I was very shocked at that. I saw from last week it looked like the student section was all behind McGloin, and this week they were all for Bolden. As soon as McGloin went in, he handed off the ball the first play. That was a 1-yard gain, and automatically half the student section, it seemed, had the number 1 finger up in the air, calling for Bolden to get back in the game. Wide receiver reverse results in a fumble. They're blaming McGloin. I understand if you have an opinion, but to me, it's very disappointing when fans would almost, not that they're rooting against him, but that they're that adamant saying, get this guy out of the game. Whoever's in the game, support him. I understand you have a preference, one or the other, but yeah, that's just my take on it. I think Bolden definitely played better overall for the game. McGloin, I think the numbers speak for themselves. McGloin was 1 for 10 for 0 yards. Now, those 9 incompletions were definitely not all his fault, but then Bolden, who went 11 for 29 with 1 interception, could have been probably 2, 3, or even 4. So either way, yeah, neither quarterback is doing well, and some people are holding the 1 in the air, some people are holding the 11 in the air. I'm about to go and hold the number 2 in the air, call for the third-string guy, Shane McGregor.
Well, you're right. You're a fan. You want to support your team. You want to support whoever's in there. I don't see how booing someone necessarily lifts their spirit. Doesn't lift their spirit. But as far as McGloin and Bolden go, there's just no answer. And it's kind of a shame too, because you got a future NFL player, and Derek Moy there, and he's not getting the passes thrown to him, so he can show off his stuff to scouts and things like that. But
yeah,
so
let me clarify real quick. Yeah, I didn't hear any boos per se, but a lot of negative comments and a lot of just number 1 fingers being held in the air. So they weren't being too inappropriate and mean, and I can't think of the exact right word to describe it. They weren't being too degrading towards the quote-unquote wrong quarterback being in the game, but they were definitely making their opinions known. Just by holding that number 1 in the air was enough to make their opinions heard, and that's an issue in my book.
Yeah, Alabama was just definitely bigger, stronger, and faster. If a few things happen differently, the game definitely gets at least a little bit closer and doesn't look as bad. It just seems all season is only been 2 games, but throughout these 2 games, Bolden, he's been having all his passes dropped. Maybe if Curtis Drake catches that long bomb at the beginning to start the game, maybe things turn out differently. I don't know. But
yeah, you had that one. You had Davon drop. Yeah, Davon dropped the 1 out there. You had Moy drop 1 or 2. I can't tell you how many I saw Justin Brown drop. I don't think he ended up recording a catch, maybe 1. They couldn't stand with Alabama's rushing throughout the full game, with Richardson 111 yards, the backup Lacey 85, and he was huge. You looked at him and you thought there was a defensive lineman running up the middle. So it's still early in the season. Penn State is definitely not the quality of Alabama. Pretty much everybody knew that. So it's not going to be a great indication of the year. I just hope for Nittany Lion's sake that they turn it around, because a couple articles in the Collegian and messages you see on Facebook are calling for Joe Paterno's retirement, and I don't think that's a wise decision after playing against a very talented Alabama team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a bright spot of the game, but one player that stood out was Silas Redd. He seemed like the only Penn State player that was able to get anything done. I think he's going to be a stud for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, he will. I mean, he didn't have great numbers when you look back at it, averaging 3 yards per carry, but, I mean, still, he was the only bright spot of the team. You said it exactly, and you're right. When one play goes differently, I mean, if Silas can break one more tackle on a play, he's going the distance. I mean, early on, Alabama runs a fake punt that they get stuffed, and it doesn't get reviewed, and they give him the first down. I mean, there's so many little things that could have changed the game early, and then once you get behind Alabama, you're not catching up.
Yeah, well, Penn State definitely, at least they don't have to deal with any more SEC teams the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's a rough end, and we'll see what happens when Big Ten season comes along. But let's switch it over to Big East territory and out to Pitt and Heinz Field. What do you think, Alex? What do you think of the what is the final score? 35-29 final score against Maine. What do you take away from this game?
You know what? The first game, I thought everyone knew there's going to definitely be some growing pains. Now, was it to that extent? No. I definitely thought that first game they were going to play better than they did. So you kind of dismiss it in a way. It's like a new coach, extreme new system. They won the game. Well, you know, we won't think too much about it. But still, High Octane was kind of highly disappointing. As far as the game against Maine, when the point of scheduling them is for the sake of having a 1AA team on the schedule and having a cupcake game heading into a big game against Iowa, and it's only a 5-point game, that's more than alarming. I mean, this is ridiculous. I know, yes, they're 2-0, and I know they won, but my God, I mean, I told everyone to. I told everyone not to expect big things, but I didn't tell everyone to expect the complete mess that is Pitt football right now. Tino Sinceri just does not look good in this offense. I said that in our last show. I knew that was going to be the case. Ray Graham's the only bright spot on the team, and he even really couldn't do much in the second half of that game. So the defense, I think, is even the most disappointing thing. I mean, how can you allow Maine just to put up the kind of yards they did and the kind of points they did? Even if, you know, your stars aren't there, even if, you know, you don't got seniors, you got younger players, it's ridiculous. It's 1AA school, and they only won by 5 points. That's the only thing I can say about it. A big time program like Pitt needs to beat a team by more than 6 points here. And yeah, you look at it, you said it with the yards. I mean, Maine didn't run the ball very much, only 25 carries the whole game, but 334 passing yards for this guy and 3 touchdowns. That's the kind of numbers we should be hoping to see out of Tino Sinceri in this offense, not a 2-interception day. But I think what alarms me most, and you hit it already, is the defense at Pitt. You see them up 35-15 with 8 minutes left in the game, and Maine somehow scores 2 touchdowns to make it look closer. And I mean, I don't like what they're doing down the stretch. They're letting too much go by. Oh, I completely agree. It's kind of a shame in a way. I am kind of high on Trey Anderson, though. I know he's a walk-on freshman, but coming out of high school, he has experience with this kind of offense. He knows how to handle the no-huddle. And he was only in there for a certain period of time, but he looked comfortable. He had a decent long bomb to the end of the end zone. It was like, I think, 30 or 40, maybe even 50 yards. I really can't remember. But if he could have just connected on that, that definitely could have gave the spark the Panthers needed. I think he will be the answer, and not Tino Sinceri here in the near future. Todd Graham said he only put him in the game because he wanted just to have him in there to have some kind of experience. Really, am I really supposed to believe that when the game is that close, the reason you put in a freshman walk-on is just because you want him in the game just for the sake of it? Am I really supposed to believe that? No, there's a quarterback controversy, and he's trying to dismiss it.
Yeah, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this kid from Pearland, Texas, he was originally going to Tulsa under Todd Graham, and then after Graham made the move here to the Bird, he followed him along. And yeah, you look at what he did. I mean, 33 yards and 7 attempts. It's a better yards per attempt average and much better passer rating than we saw out of Sinceri. I think you're right. Just looking at the numbers alone and what he did coming in at the end of the game, I think that, depending on what happens against Iowa this week, and Iowa's in trouble too. They lost to Iowa State in 4 overtimes, so who knows what's going to happen this week. You got a couple of struggling teams playing. But I think you could see Anderson getting some time again next week, especially if Sinceri doesn't start throwing it to the right team.
Yeah, he'll definitely be seeing some time unless Tino finds a way to get it together. Well, I mean, I guess we'll see. God knows if they don't get things straightened out, Iowa is just going to pummel them coming off a very disappointing loss. So hopefully things wrap up there.
Yeah, looks like we might be having dual quarterback systems in both Keystone school programs, and that's how well it's working in Penn State. I'm not sure how much better it would work out at Pitt.
The mess of these Pennsylvania sports teams, right?
Yep, all around the Keystone State, we have a lot of disappointing results for the first 2 weeks of the season. Even though one team's 1-1 and the other team is 2-0, you would think it to be a lot differently, judging by everybody's reaction. Well, that does it for our recap of Pitt and Penn State, our Keystone teams after Week 2. Alex, thank you very much for the Pitt advice, and hopefully we'll see some improvement, hopefully a win for Pitt next week against Iowa, and Penn State can hopefully head out to Temple and get a win, and we'll be a little bit happier on our next broadcast. So for Alex Laverson, I'm James Dodson for 3SN. Have a pleasant night.
Touching you, sweet Caroline. Good time.